Self-driving cars. Self-driving cars are often regarded to as the next step in road safety, as many of the CEOs from many self-driving car companies will tell you.
A safe and reliable way to building safe, any manner that's safe or reliable.
Applied to AI safety.
Reliability and safety to a level of reliability that would be safe in, say,
in the safest manner possible.
Throughout this mission on ensuring the safety of the cars and the technology.
So, tonight I'll be examining whether or not that is actually the case. To start off, we need to understand more about what the current status of self-driving cars is, including if they are even available for purchase. Just like at school, the autonomy of self-driving cars is graded on a level scheme, where it needs to reach a certain criteria to pass up a level. Unlike at school, there are only 5 levels. Well, I say that, but most of us barely reach a 5 anyway. There's a widespread belief that we are closer to having self-driving cars that are higher on this scale than we actually are.
There's an incredible amount of confusion in the general public around the context of self-driving. In our survey data here, 23% of respondents believe that a self-driving vehicle is available for purchase today.
Most self-driving cars available for purchase today reach only around a level 2 or 3 on the autonomy scale, which, as you can see from this graphic, means that they are capable of performing multiple functions at once, like braking and steering on their own, or that they are capable of driving completely on their own in certain conditions. Both levels also include the fact that the driver is required by law to keep one hand on the wheel at all times. Now that you understand a bit more about the current status of self-driving cars, let's talk safety. Even though, as I showed before, the CEOs of these companies are quick to tell us the future to safe roads are self-driving cars, the little data we have actually says the opposite.
In the US, the current fatality rate is about 1 death per 1 million hours of driving. Do know that Uber's self-driving vehicle needed a human to intervene around every 19 kilometers, meaning it failed every 19 kilometers.
And of course, since we are on the topic of safety, we need to address what is believed to be the first and only fatal crash in which a self-driving car killed a pedestrian and not the driver. Around 1.5 years ago, Uber was conducting tests for their new self-driving program, when on one eventful night, one of their cars struck and killed a woman crossing the road. Now, this crash has a lot of significance, especially since it was the first of its kind. Also, it's because it's very hard to determine who is at fault with this crash. Now, first, as noted before, the accident occurred at night, which normally should not have affected the LiDAR system and other systems on the car, but always could have. Next, we should also note that the victim was crossing in the middle of the road and not at an official crossing, and had a bike with her. Finally, you should know that there was in fact a driver in the car, and that he did react to the person, but just too late. Now, what is interesting about this crash is that nothing actually malfunctioned inside the car. It worked perfectly as it was intended to. It was just not intended to work properly. In reality, the crash could have been avoided if the program on which the car was running had included parameters allowing it to be more discerning. The car was traveling at 70 kilometers per hour and detected the pedestrian 6 seconds before impact, more than enough time for a modern car with a driver to stop or to swerve out of the way. But the car could not properly identify the woman. Indeed, the data recovered from the car shows it struggling to discern if the person is in fact a person, a bike, or a car. Now, normally, if you do not recognize what you see on the road, your first instinct would be to stop, or at least slow down to avoid a crash. But the car was not programmed to act in a particular way when in doubt, so it just kept going. This is a huge problem, and it raises many questions about how these cars should think. But that was not the only design flaw the car had. About 2 seconds before the collision, the car actually detected it. and knew it had to warn the driver so that the driver could take control of the car and manage the situation himself. But the car had actually no means to tell the driver to take control of the car. And this led to the collision, because the driver only noticed 1 second before the collision and disengaged the autopilot by engaging the steering wheel and the brakes. But this was too late. And, well, we all know what happened. Now, that crash did happen a year and a half ago. And many of the programs now found on cars are a lot more fit for the road. And there have not since then been any more accidents similar to this one. But there is still a barrier that is very hard to cross. To make the AIs that control the cars safer, they need to be smarter and closer to consciousness than anything we have ever seen before. However, that isn't actually the main hurdle. The problem is making the car drive once it is that smart. Because when a car is programmed to ensure safety at all costs, the rational calculation it will be likely to make is that it should not drive. Indeed, the only absolute safe way to drive is, well, to not drive at all. In fact, we have even seen AI do this before.
Take the AI program Dr. Tom Murphy developed to do something relatively simple, to play Tetris. This program worked brilliantly, but Tetris always wins. The game is unbeatable and you will eventually lose. When confronted with this option, the program did something to ensure it wouldn't lose. It paused the game.
Yeah, the AI let itself go to the highest point it could and then paused so that it would not lose. Now, you might be thinking, so what? This is an AI meant to play a game from the 80s, not an AI meant to drive a complex machine through a complex system. Well, the exact same thing actually happened to a Google self-driving car as well, when the car reached a four-way intersection. Now, four-way intersections are actually pretty simple. Essentially, you arrive here, and you can go here, or here. Wait, no, you go here. And if you're in England, you go like that, or like this. And then if you're a pedestrian, you just go like that. And this is a pentagram, which, to be fair, is an accurate representation of the roads in Kuwait, the literal gateway to hell. Anyway, I think we'll just let the clip actually explain what a four-way intersection is.
Take a simple four-way stop as an example. The rules of the road make this seem like an easy task. The first person to arrive at the intersection has the right of way, and in the case that two vehicles arrive at the same time, the vehicle to the right has the right of way. When it arrived at one of these four-way junctions, humans kept nudging forward, trying to make their way onto the junction before their turn. The Google car was programmed to follow the letter of the law, and just like our Tetris program for earlier, the self-driving vehicle was put in a no-win scenario and stuck on pause.
So, if self-driving cars, at least in their current state, are not actually that safe, then why are they being portrayed as the best way to safer roads? Is it because there's no alternative? Well, that's actually not the case.
And if the goal is safety above all else, there are other less complicated things that could be done. For example, since speeding is known to be one of the top causes of car accidents, members of the European Parliament recently provisionally agreed to require all vehicles sold in Europe to include mandatory speed limiters.
So, now you might be asking yourself, why do we not hear about these alternatives, and why are they not being promoted more? Well, for that, let's continue the clip. Yeah, he's right. Of course, it's not as cool or as fun. Everyone loves to be able to drive over the speed limit. That's the whole point of sports cars or motorcycles. So to have limiters installed on cars might be the best way to be safe, but it definitely isn't the most interesting or revolutionizing, which makes people less interested. And I mean, to be fair, would you rather have a cool AR car that does everything for you, or a same old driving car where you have to take the wheel, but you can't even drive a kilometer over the speed limit on an empty road? I mean, just imagine what all racing movies like Fast and Furious would look like, having to stay on below the speed limit. So, to recap, I have just showed you why self-driving cars are not the safest way to the future, to the safest roads, to reduce the death of pedestrians and of drivers, and I've showed other alternatives. But the truth is, even though I have shown these, even though I have demonstrated why they would work, we will likely still have a future with self-driving cars, just because they are more interesting and more advertisable. More people want self-driving cars without the need of the safety benefits than people want speed limiters. So I just want you people to think about that the safest way might not become the future just because of what you want.